It's so fun to like see you in Zoom. I've seen so many videos of you, and now I'm like in the Zoom with you.
Oh man. Well, it's thank you for taking the time and for having interest in the work and et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, for real. I know you're very busy, and I can tell from the emails, like we're all kind of very rapid fire right now. Just like, wait, what? What are we doing? When are we meeting? What's
I
happening?
know. I'm so sorry. I was so embarrassed afterwards. I was like, "Ay, Marta, jeez."
Hi, thanks for joining us on Reflect, Recalibrate. Woo woo. We're so happy you're here. Remember to tell your friends, your family, and your foes, yes, your foes, that they too can learn about artivists and artivism by subscribing to RFC anywhere they listen to podcasts. They can also watch and subscribe on YouTube at Reflect Calibrate the Podcast. Well, I think that's that. Now let's get into it.
I swear I'm a little more organized than what it seemed. A little more. I can't say I'm the greatest, but it's like I think it was extra confusing this time of the year because I just started teaching again, and then my son just started college for the first time. Like we're dealing his stuff, and so I felt like really like boom, 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 like all these things going on at once. And
Is he in state for college?
thank goodness he's stayed in state. He's in at UCLA.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you. I try to be really like, you can do it. Go ahead, go. Like he's the one that didn't want to go far. He's like, I think I'll stay in state for undergrad and then for grad school. And I was like, oh, okay, he's going to grad school. He's like, then I'll go somewhere else. I was like, oh, okay, all right,
Does he know what he wants to study?
He is like an amazing musician.
I know.
He's actually in the same major I did in undergrad, ethnomusicology. So he has this whole vision, like he's already, like his life is, I'm glad that he has found his passion, so music is like the thing for him. And so he's having a good time just thinking about what could possibly be with music, and I'm like, all right, okay.
Infinite possibilities.
Exactly. I think he sees that. I think he also, it's interesting. I think he has a little more faith in the industry than we ever did. He's kind of looking at him like, he's like, yeah, because I think I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm wrong, but I'll never say I told you so, but he knows like all the warnings and stuff. So,
Yeah.
I love that we're already jumping into conversing. So yeah, welcome, Marta. Thank you so much for being here today. I think we should go around and say real quick who we are, where we are, just very briefly, what do we look like, what kind of space we're in. Excuse me. Drink your coffee too while you do it. That's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
Janet, would you like to start?
Oh, sure. I'll start. So, hello, everybody. I'm Janet, one of your co-hosts here on RFC. I am in my studio right now. It's kind of stark. I'm wearing green glasses, short afro, and I am ready to have a great conversation.
My name is Danny Snyder. I go by she, her. I am in my office space with a bunch of art on my wall. I'm a white girl with a lot of blonde hair right now. It's very blonde. I'm not used to being quite this blonde, to be honest.
It is very blonde. It looks
it's
good.
A little,
I like it.
I like it. And then Marta.
Hi, my name is Martha Gonzalez, she, her, hers. And I'm also in a room that's kind of blue with a lot of artwork behind me. And I am, I feel very hopeful today and energetic. Yeah.
Great. And you are an artivista. What else are you?
I wear many hats.
Yeah.
I am, first and foremost, I'm the daughter of immigrant parents, immigrant mother, and I'm a sister to 3 other siblings. I'm a mother myself to an 18-year-old young man, boy, soon to be man. I am an auntie, and I'm a wife. I'm an Angelino. from Los Angeles, born and raised here in Boyle Heights, which is originally Tongva land. And I'm also academic. I'm an associate professor at Scripps College. I'm a musician. I've been a musician for many, many years, over 30 years now. Yeah, I teach, I write. I'm a writer, songwriter, a singer, a percussionist. Wow, lots and lots of stuff. I'm tired just reciting all.
Yeah, you know, if we think about all the things that we do and all the things that we are, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot.
It is.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It is. And when I was asked a couple of, I'm asked sometimes like, okay, how do you do it all? I was like, well, I feel like I have done it all, but just not all at the same time. There are times where motherhood has taken me away from all the other things that I tended to do. And then, and then kind of I abandoned sometimes the motherhood to get all the other stuff that I have to get done. And I think that we can do it all, just not all at the same time.
That's sound advice. One at a
Yeah.
time. One at a time.
You know what?
One at a time.
You said that in that podcast episode you did with Rafa on Dancing Sober. I listened to it and I loved that you had said that. If people listening here should go listen to that too. You also mentioned relationality and about how we define ourselves by the relationships we keep and not necessarily like what we do, the job to make the money. A lot of people say like, okay, I'm a teacher, if that's who I am. It's like, well, no, I am, like you said, a wife, I'm a tia, I'm a sister. So I love that. And I think that would be a nice way to introduce today's podcast about like, what maybe are you doing right now in community?
Wow. I feel like a lot of the different tenets of my work always have roots in the community, even when I am not always in their presence, right? So I would say the first thing that comes to mind is an album that we're about to release and perform for the stage. It's I guess it's a staged album. There's like a kind of genre that's emerging in theater and music where, I've been working with a woman named Virginia Grice, and Virginia Grice is an award-winning playwright, which I think you should do a podcast with. She's amazing. She's originally from Texas, and and she basically was very inspired by a novel by Elena Viramontes, who's a Chicana originally from Boyle Heights, who now teaches at Cornell. She's been there for many years. And so she put this book out way back in the late 80s. It's called Their Dogs Came With Them. And Their Dogs Came With Them really kind of chronicles in novel form the building of the 5, the 10, the 710 freeway that's very prominent here, like these intersections, how these freeways cross. But really it's about the politics of what it took to build these freeways, right? And it's all told through different characters in this novel, right? Beautifully set. What happens to the old houses, the old neighborhoods, the bulldozing, like all of these things, and all the characters in and around any ghetto/neighborhood, right? And so the book was very well received back in the day. I remember reading it in my first year in college. And anyhow, Elena Viramontes comes along many years later and decides to write a play, like a play adaptation. She writes this play. She and I meet in Arizona. She's doing something with them in the border, some kind of program they have there. And then I was there as a ASU Gamage resident artist. We meet, we do this play, and I write music for it, just kind of like background type stuff, but I always heard songs in it. And so this is a long answer, huh?
No, this is great. And it's also making more sense. I was kind of curious. I was like, how did she end up in Arizona? This seemed like a kind of like I know you were in Washington State for like 6 years or so, and then like you were in Arizona, and then you're back to Los Angeles. So I was like,
well,
okay.
I went from Washington to LA, and I did a residency in Arizona. Only like I would go in for a week, work my butt off, and then I'd come back home to LA. So I did that, let's say 6 times out of the year, and that was my residency, right? Yeah, and so I met her there, and we started working together. And after we were done setting up this play. I played music for it. I mean, the first time we performed it was at Perryville Women's Prison. It was an amazing experience. I remember feeling really overwhelmed, and I actually cried at the end of it. I was so like overwhelmed with emotion, just the thought of this, and we're doing this with women inmates and like human beings, you know, that just like attack this play. Like it was just beautiful. And soon after that, we staged it again in Tucson, Arizona. And shortly, I'd always talk about how I could hear more, right? Like I felt like there was so much more music. And so we quickly, she applied for these grants, and kind of other institutions around the country wanted to really invest in our development of this actual album. So now this novel turned play is now turning into an album. So the album is inspired by the contents in the play, some of the characters, some of the ideas. We went around the country at the Clarice, in UT, in Arizona, where we spent time in the studio basically writing and being in community with different communities that were affected by displacement or by gentrification, right? And we would do collective songwriting workshops with them. And so some of these ideas, these sentiments, not everything made it into the album, but this is an album that we've been recording. We started before the pandemic shut everything down. We had to wait, and then we restarted again. And then some of the funders and partners started saying, like, come to this space, come to our space. So this is the first time I've ever really worked on an album that was well funded. Because every other project we've done, man, we're like, we've been, you know, we steal time, you know, it's out of the kindness of our hearts and time, and like, you know, and this is the first time people are like, hey, come over here, I'll give you money, I'll pay you guys, I'll put you up, I'll feed you. We're like, oh shit. And then you have a studio you can work in 5 hours a day. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So that's what we've been doing. So we're finishing it up. We're about to go perform some of this album at Cornell University, which we were on hold. That was one of the first stops we were going to make to create the album, and the pandemic shut it down. So we're going back to Elena Viramontes's home, where she teaches as a novelist and as a writer in the English department. And so we're going to go and set up the play / album, you know, there.
Wow.
That's so exciting. I love
Yeah.
It really
we
is.
try to, like, because the Zoom with the, you know, it's hard for us to keep our microphones on while people are talking because we don't want to interrupt them. But we're both laughing a lot when you say the well-funded parts. Like, it's actually well-funded.
I mean, it has been, it really has been, because every album I've ever written, we don't get paid to write, right? Or for our time. We have to like, oh, okay, what time you get? Can you block out this week? Can you block, you know, we just steal time, sort of get things done, because it, you know, we're inspired and we want to do this. But this is the first time that I think that both between she and I, it's a very unique project in many ways, because it's 3 Chicanas, different generations, different disciplines as well. So there's a novelist, a theater playwright, and then a musician like myself getting together and creating this work based on displacement. It takes place in different time periods, this album. And so there are all these different intersectional sort of like ways of looking at an analysis of this play, and how, I mean, this theater album, it's not a musical, it's a theater album, which is different, right? I love musicals, but it's not musical.
This is what I was going to ask you to clarify, because I was thinking a staged album. What does that feel like? What does that look like?
Right? Yeah, I don't know. I'm I'm not quite sure. You know, somebody told me that, you know, Toshi Regan, she's Toshi Regan is the daughter, related to, oh my God, Regan. She's Sweet Honey in the Rock. She's one of the.
I recognize that last name, Regan.
Regan. I can't believe I don't remember her first name, their mother's first name, and is a musician, like a blues musician. And so she loved Parable of the Sower so much that she got this book, and she says she has a whole album and a whole play kind of thing. Same idea. She goes out into the audience, she sits down in her chair, she says, I love this book, this novel, and I wrote some songs about it. She puts it down and then she starts playing. That's kind of the idea, which I realize it's like a not a zeitgeist, but like a sort of like it's I think a lot of people are sort of doing some things like this. It's like a new genre that it's not a musical. It's not, and you may have some dialogue, but it's not what's central is the music, the compositions, and the sort of the arrangements of these songs. And it's an actual album. We'll have an album by next year, February, and we're printing vinyl mostly. It's going to be on all the digital platforms, but mainly what we're printing is vinyl. And the idea is, we're going to have like old school writing and like, things like that are important for folks to know as they're listening to the album.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy that you brought up the work with Sweet Honey in the Rock as the example. I just looked it up just so we could have the name. Bernice Johnson Regan.
That's the mom.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
exactly, right. Exactly. And I was going to take my mother to see this play in DC, and I got the tickets. I didn't get the tickets. I wanted to get the tickets, and I looked at it and I was like, I just missed it. And I was just trying to get it for her birthday. But thinking about, the images that I saw online and how they're staging that, it helps understand, the idea of what a staged album is, and like you said, a lot of people are doing this in different ways. The first person that comes to my mind, because she's like everywhere, Beyonce, and thinking about how she's using a video format to create these sort of staged albums, but in the theatrical sense, it's definitely different. And I'm like, I want to see this. When is it going to happen? So we're going to have to find out.
We might go to New York. We're about to perform it in Santa Barbara and some of it, and then also in San Francisco. And so it's exciting, for me.
Yeah. And this is very exciting for me, especially a lot of my work starts in devised work. And so I always felt like here in the States, we don't do that very much, but my experience, like living in Europe and abroad, a lot more experiences, or I should say opportunities to do devised work. I get like a little bit of funding for it. But yeah, like I've done a lot of shows where we had quote music accompaniment, and maybe it's throughout like the whole theatrical experience, and maybe little bits of singing here and there, but it's mostly like instrumental musical accompaniment. So I'm very curious to see how this works, because I imagine a lot of the pieces are mostly sung, right?
Yes, like so they are songs in the sense that they're 3-5 minutes long, some are 7 minutes long, and it's really lifting some of the language in the novel that sort of worked for the play, and then I take that work and then I put music and melody crafted into a song, a certain idea or a certain sentiment, or an entire monologue, right, into the song itself. It may create it into a song, right? And that's kind of the idea. And it was difficult at times, because I feel like we are, even as musicians, as we are used to sort of like, verse, chorus, right? Bridge, right? And so sometimes the dialogue in the play, or which was once not in the novel, doesn't really lend itself to that structure. So some of the structures in the songs change, right? Like I tried not to stick to like that pattern of composition, right? But also understanding that as a listener, we're used to that, right? Like we need to make sense so that the information that's being imparted makes sense and it's palatable for us. Because if it's just something totally out there and we're not quite sure what's happening here, and we expect a kind of pattern, it can kind of throw you off. So I try to be very mindful of that, as well as staying true to the dialogue or the sentiment behind the song itself.
And will you be singing in any of the performances?
I am. Yeah, I sing in most of the album. I mean, I do all the album, and we were going to have different singers from East LA come in, and it just became a logistical nightmare. But I'm singing the entire thing, and I will be the one touring it this first iteration. If it gets too busy, then I know exactly who I want to bring in. And I've already talked to Virginia about, like, I think you guys should still do it, but I might not be able to do it every time, because Yeah. Exciting.
It is very exciting. I want to try not to hug the microphone, Janet. I'm sure you have lots of questions too.
Well, I'm just thinking about the connections in being an artivista and having this life of doing this work, and how it's come into these spaces that not only reflect the community in which we do the work, right, on a daily basis, but also in academia. And one of the questions that came up in my mind in thinking about how this is a staged album is thinking about the difference between your experience in working with an artist and creating this work without having the constraints of working within a university, and how you work within the university, but thinking about the comparison. So this is what's on my mind right now in what you're saying, because I'm excited about it. I'm thinking about how the language of staged album versus, let's say, performance art, and how these can be received by the audience and be palatable for everyone to be able to engage and enjoy. But then when you're looking within academia, how it's situated, and if this is something that potentially, I don't want to say it doesn't align with how academia is structured, but thinking about just the being able to have that creative freedom versus going into a university and having to work within these parameters. That's what I'm thinking about. So I was curious your thoughts on that, and how you're
No, I
functioning
love
and
that.
managing that situation.
That's a great question. So I feel like number one, as an artivista, right? I always signal to the fact that it's different than being an artist activist, right? Because artist activist, I'm an artist activist, like that's there's nothing new in the concept. We know that artists oftentimes, have their content of their work tends to be political, social commentary, like, right? That's kind of nothing new in our world, right? I would say that an artivista is unique or different in the sense that it's really focusing on process-based work, right? Where I am as a musician, I am using my skill sets as a musician to engage communities in processes, right? I develop out processes like the collective songwriting method, for example. I sent y'all links about that. So the collective songwriting method is one such process that is really, it does take musical skill set, right, as a musician to be able to engage a community of people, 20, 30 people in writing a song together, right? It can't just happen. Like there's moments where I'm negotiating energies, I'm negotiating people's lines and what their suggestions, like I'm trying to keep the energy up, and suddenly everybody happens to have this experience and it's cathartic, and everybody, most of the time people enjoy it. Some people have cried, some people, and I realize like, wow. So we learned these techniques first, and it was through the Zapatista communities in 1997 in Chiapas that got us thinking about what we do as artists. Like, it can't just be us creating music that's political and then selling it. We're just something else in the capitalist framework, right? Now and as we've seen, you can sell revolution, the concept, the terms, the ideas, and really you make no impact. What we have to do now as artists, I believe, is really engage with communities, find ways and methodologies that outlive us, right? And so that's the idea behind the collective songwriting method. And it's an idea and a value system that I try to instill in every other thing that I do. So as somebody who is trained in gender studies, performance studies, ethnomusicology, like all of these ways in thinking about music, art, and culture, and ways in which, processes, with that value system in my mind of like how processes are the products and the stage productions are important, but so are the methodologies that we develop out. So that's what I'm bringing into academia. And I think that the greatest challenge for me has been to build the language around it, around what I do. So everything from concepts and terms like artivista, convivencia, participatory music and dance practices, and continuing to bring that into the fold of the language of academia and valuing it, bringing all these other academics that I'm citing that make it important, Black studies scholars, Black feminism, Chicana feminism, communications theorists, right? Marxism, right? All of these things support the work that I'm doing and validate it, right? And then I'm, of course, developing out new terms and new language for it. And so I feel like in many ways, I come into academia at a very important time because the work has been done for me. There are so many scholars that I can draw on that support my work unknowingly, right? That I draw from and I say, look at what Gloria Anzaldúa is saying. Look at what the Combahee River Collective, look at what they did. Look at what, it's the bell hooks, right? Look at all of these things help support the work that I'm doing. And so I'm really, you couldn't negate in academia like what I do. There's a whole field, and it's interdisciplinary. So I'm at Ethnomusicology, Society for Ethnomusicology. I'm in American Studies. I'm in Chicano Studies. I'm in ethnomusicology. in American Studies. So many different disciplines that are interdisciplinary, right? The work that I do is interdisciplinary. So in the case of the Writing the Currents of the Wilding Wind, which is the name of the album that we were talking about just a while ago, that is about history, in East LA. It's about displacement. It's about racism. It's about, gender issues in the album as well. I mean, it's about so much. It's about queerness. It's about so many things, and all of this can be told and dissected through song, right? Dialogue and song and theater and stage production. It's about dreaming. It's about hope. It's about loss. I mean, there are so many things. It's a human experience, and because life is interdisciplinary, these methodologies are important to draw those different issues out.
Thank you for that, and thank you for articulating it in that way, because I'm thinking about students right now, just in the beginning of the semester, and they're saying, well, this really isn't empirical data, this personal experience that I'm having or what I see that people go through on a daily basis. And I say to them, it is empirical data. It's a different type of empirical data because, as you said, it's interdisciplinary. And thinking about bell hooks and thinking about, how to transgress, right, within academia and bring these different spaces into this place and have it be received and not have that same pushback. Bell hooks is one of the people who made it so that you don't get that same pushback. But now it's the challenge of being able to have students shift their thinking so that they understand that their personal experiences, as well as everything else that's happening within the public and other private spaces, is important in the process of creating their work. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And then dealing with administration, and hopefully they're open to these things.
Yes,
but having to manage that situation. Right?
I really feel like number one, for my students, for example, I'm teaching a research methods course in Chicano Latino studies, and one of the first things we acknowledge is how research in and of itself is a colonial framework, right? It starts with colonization, and the university is a place of exploitation, right? It's the knowledge engine for capitalism, right? And so when we acknowledge that, and we say, and of course, that's how we start. We read Tuhi Weiss-Smith, right? Research is Decolonizing Research Methods. Classic book. They're like, whoa, wait a minute. And some of them are sociologists, some of them, because it's an interdisciplinary field, right? Some of them are in the hard disciplines. Others are like more humanities based, right? But I have the students from different places, and they're sort of like, okay, so what do we do with all this? And I was like, okay, it doesn't mean that we can't go in and challenge that shit, right? Like at some point, the academy didn't have ethnic studies, right? And if it wasn't for social movements of 60s and 70s, studies, we wouldn't have the disciplines that you have right now. We wouldn't have this class. We wouldn't have there. I think there are always moments of rupture in places of that of dominance, right? Even in among the hegemony, like we have moments of of possibility and hope. And that's what I think our department is at the Intercollegiate Chicano Latino Studies Department in Claremont. And that's what my classes are, as hubs of like the kinds of things we talk about and dissect. And that's what I think pieces of art and music can be as well, even in and amongst all this madness and noise that you have around us, right? These moments of possibility. And that's what all of these scholars did before me, that I can say, and where it's not theory. For example, the fact that we're, as artists, we theorize. Our songwriting is theorizing, and it's not the dead white man theory, right? It's, and what we think should be theory and we theorize other ways, right? Through songs. People of color have always theorized other ways. Joy James says that. And that's, we've always done that. We've always learned from our singers and songwriters over the course of history. This is how we learn value systems. And it's all in the songwriting. It's all in the oral history and the storytelling. And so those are things that people of color have dragged into the fold of academia and stand firm and say like, no, this is important information. And again, it all comes from social movement, right? We can trace it all the way back to social movement and us saying like, no, we need to study these things as well. This is also knowledge, right? What you think is not knowledge, it is. And we're going to, and there's a saying in Spanish by the Zapatistas says, no tenemos que pedir permiso para ser libres. We don't have to ask permission to be free. And that's like, we don't have to ask your permission whether or not you think this is valid. We know it is. It's part of it's embedded in our culture. And we know it to be true and real and valuable.
I love how much passion you speak with, and it's making me think of you should be singing this.
I can. I wrote a song about it.
Martha, you want to hear something funny? Is that like when I was living in Mexico, I dated this.
Where did you live? Where did you?
I lived in Mexico City. Yeah.
Oh, la Ciudad de Mexico.
Yeah, la ciudad. Sí. And I actually lived right next to Frida Kahlo's house. It's amazing.
Oh, yeah,
it's amazing. In Quetzal. It was like, I miss it so much.
Beautiful there, yeah.
But yeah, I was dating this guy just very, very briefly. He was kind of weird. But one thing that was not weird about him was his taste in music. And he showed me your performance on Tiny Desk. And I was like, who is this person? I loved your voice, and it reminded me so much of this woman.
He wasn't so weird. I'm kidding.
No, that's the only way he was not weird. The only way. And he was so surprised I'd never heard of you, because I'm from the States. I never lived in California, but like you're all over now. But I was like, oh my gosh, like you reminded me so much of this African singer I used to work with in Texas, who she also had this very strong, like kind of raw quality to her voice. And I could never understand what she was saying either, because my Spanish still sucks. I'm just going to say that right now, Martha. So I didn't even know what you were singing about, but I was like, wow, I just loved the music. And then here Janet and I are making this podcast, and we're trying to figure out where the term artivist came from, and artivista. And then we found your book, and then I'm reading your book, and I was like, holy shit, I know this singer. I mean, I don't know her, but I was like, I listened to her music. Like I didn't even put it together that it was the same thing. So all that's to say is this is how we really found you, through your book, Chican Artivistas, Music, Community, and Transborder Tactics in East Los Angeles. People read this book. But I will say, we were kind of hoping when we got this book that we would figure out where this term came from. And I was like, I don't think she's really going to go into that in this book. And that's totally okay. I got so much else out of that book. I mean, so much. In fact, I didn't even think on a personal level, like even just you and your relationship with your father, that resonated with me so much when you talk about that in your book. But we are wondering, like, do you know where this word comes from? Is it from the Zapatistas? Like, do you know?
Oh, I want to say like, yeah, I came up with it, but of course not. No, I didn't. And I have to say, like, there was a group of us that started using it. And at first it used to be Zapatistas. people studying zapatismo, and then also artists, right? Zapatistas for a while. And then folks are using artivistas. The first time I ever heard somebody say it was Felicia Montes. And I have to be completely honest, Felicia Montes, which you should have on your podcast. Felicia Montes is a Chicana artist, artivista, mujer indígena. She has a whole way in which she introduces herself beautifully. And she's also now a new assistant professor at Long Beach State, I believe. But she always was a lecturer in different colleges throughout. She has and she started after 1997 Encuentro, which I signal to in the book. She started something called Mujeres de Maíz, along with not just her, many other, Claudia Mercado, a lot of different other mujeres artists. Some are sculptors, some are singers, poets, dancers, theater playwrights, and started this thing called Mujeres de Maíz. And I've been a part of it for many years. I would say that Mujeres de Maíz is like, I want to say like 25 years old, maybe something like over 20 years. And it happens in East LA every year, once a year, for events for a month. And basically it's just beautiful. It brings different women from different backgrounds together to create. Collaboration is encouraged, performances, healing, herbal workshops, like all kinds of stuff. It's really cool. And so anyhow, when we were young and in the 90s, she started using, I heard that and I was like, that's right. That's exactly what we are. But I don't think I had the tenets of what it meant, like I just described earlier, where it's about process, right? We just knew that we were artist, activist, and artivista as a Spanish sounding word. We were like, because I don't say artivist. I know people that say artivist that have this whole thing on artivism, right? Artivism as in a verb, right? Active sort of thing, and which I agree with, but I consider myself an artivista as honoring the origins, but also, again, signaling to process rather than product, right? Rather than always product, right? And yet even acknowledging that actual performance, stage performance is important. I think it is important. It's beautiful. We have a value system attached to it. We have a whole market system attached to it, right? I mean, when I say process-based work and artivism and participatory stuff, it's not to negate all of that other stuff. I think it's important, people dedicate their entire lives to the skill set and master musicians on the stage. Of course, I'm not saying that, but I do think that as human beings, we have to begin to build out that other part of who we were as communities, right? Where we would do jam sessions. We would do we understand that language as well. And I think that because of capitalism and the industrialization of music, it has slowly dwindled away. That kind of way of hanging out and being in community through music, with rare exceptions, and I'm not including church music or music that happens in church, it doesn't happen anymore. I mean, on the secular level, right?
I mean, first of all, I just want to point out some connections that we have. So I have been working with Mujeres de Maíz because I lived in LA for 15 years, and one of my close friends is Lily Flor. So
Lily Flor is a Mujer de Maíz.
Yes, and she's the person who told me, Janet, you're an artivist, and I was like, what? What are you talking about? I don't even know. Am I an artist? But she was the person who told me some history. And from there, I started learning and thinking, oh, okay, yeah, this is what I do. And it really is based in process. And thinking about how it is that I'm going about creating works and how I'm going to work with others to help them in creating what it is they need to thrive. Really, that's how I think of it. And I do call myself an artivist, and how I talk about that verb of artivism, and it's two different things, right? Thinking about how just facing the fact that we have to create this livelihood, to take care of ourselves and our families. I have an almost 2-year-old. And so, it's just like having to be able to ensure that I'm doing this work that I feel that I'm supposed to be doing, my spirit is here to do, as well as being able to survive and thrive within this capitalist space that we're in, right? But when you saying that it's about process, it just brings it all together. It just makes so much sense, because that is just like with the collective songwriting that you're doing, thinking about the process in which, you go about building with each other and then coming into a creation that everyone can be engaged with.
Yeah, there's so beautiful. So you've seen some of the videos, right? And what you don't see is the conversations that happen as a result. Like, for example, during that collective songwriting workshops, people have like really deep conversations about, just because they're talking about one word they want to use as opposed to another. And what happens, people start thinking, and it's like, I realize that we don't get together and talk about and dialogue in these ways anymore, right? Not really, unless and it's not boardroom conversations. It's like about life, and people bring up their experiences of hurt and pain and migration and displacement. All of these things depends on what the song is about, right? Or why I'm being invited there, or whatever, right? The age range and the group. And some songs can be very airy and like really no sense to it, but the fact that people experience this together is cathartic in some way, right? And so when we're doing this, I always emphasize like, okay, and they're like, when we're done sometimes, oh my God, that sounded really good. And people record their songs and they're like, we hicimos una canción, qué chingón, wow. We could probably record this again, like capitalists, right? Like, oh, we could record this and like make money or whatever. I was like, no. I was like, first of all, let us remember, I said, that think about this. This is the archive now, the song we have here. Qué bonito, like everything, look at what we talked about. But we started over here, check out all this dialogue here, right? And then we're done. And then I say, that was the most important part. The conversation we had, the building out of this song. And then they think about it, they're like, oh yeah. Because I never thought we could do this. I never thought I could write anything. This is like, and then it's like, I think that is the biggest trick that I think capitalism has done in relation to creativity, right?
Ooh, child, let's say it again. People.
Is
for
that
real, for real,
right? Is that to convince people that that they're not creative, that they don't need creativity in their lives, because it doesn't make them any money. So F that. I'm not going to dedicate my time to that, right? Time is money. And if I'm not going to make $1 million, if I'm not going to be like Beyonce, or if I'm not going to be like, then I'm not going to engage in any aspect of my creative work of some kind, right? And that is the biggest theft that I think capitalism has done, is convince people that they are not creative beings, and that as humanity, we don't need to be creative to be happy. I think that if everybody was more involved in creativity of some kind, as community, or alone, but also as community, there would be less mental health. Less mental health problems, right? Yeah. There would be less loneliness for sure. Less, I think we dialogue with each other more, just to get people to connect to their creative selves is my greatest wish for the earth when I leave. And that's why when I think collective songwriting and teaching as many musicians as I can about the process and what's important about the process, and so that it outlives us, so that when I die, yeah, you can listen to the albums, fine. You might like it, you might not, but I left something else as well, right? An entire way of being and a process. Fandango, for example, I'm very involved in a Fandango community, which is participatory music and dance practice, native to the state of Veracruz, where there's good musicians, bad musicians, people are in tune, some people aren't, all around the tarima. But what happens, and the kind of moment, and you're sweating and like the shit sounding good, sometimes not so good, but everybody's coming together, and it's just like, it's beautiful. It's like people cry, people fall in love, people fight, there's food, there's drink, we've been around long enough to where there's drama. But at the end of the day, I remind myself, okay, this is happening because it's like family, right? Even in our families, we have drama, and it's just how it is, and we just have to learn to work through that and keep going, teaching it to our kids. My son grew up in the Fandango community. He loves it. He knows the difference. He's a prolific musician on the stage, but he also understands a value system of on in the community sense as well, when he's a community member in music, you know. And anyhow, yeah, I just think, you know, these are part of these processes are about trying to get people to reconnect. And I always say, like, even if you don't like fandango, when I'm teaching it to some folks, I go, find a community of practice, find something. Like, es bien importante, like, it's really important for your happiness, for your sense of self. And especially, you know, not everybody's into therapy, talk therapy. It's therapeutic, you know. So it's just, I think it's really important, and it's the biggest theft that I think colonialism has done, you know.
Oh man, thank you for using that word, colonialism. Just thinking about that and thinking about the term balance, when we think about language and how we use language and what language works well to emphasize our intentions, right? And thinking about balance and mental health, and how colonialism has definitely created this void and this difficulty in being able to engage cross-culturally. Because when you talk about fandango and the elements from which fandango and the music that's created come from, I think you were talking about how, you know, not only are we speaking about, I think it's, you were saying it's like Afro-Cuban culture or involved within the fandango structure. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I'm thinking
so fandango is native to the state of Veracruz, and that is very Mexican. Fandango o bon, which is a collaborative project. That's another thing, that as fandango communities, we've connected across other communities of practice, like the Obon community, through the leadership of Nobuko Miyamoto, who's Japanese American, legendary Japanese American artist, activist. She pulled us into this thing. We started teaching fandango. She would teach Obon, which is remember, there's a time period in Buddhist tradition where they remember their dead, and they do it through movement and dance, and it's very similar to fandango in the sense they have a wooden platform in the middle. And so the fandango bon, fast forward, it's about 12 years old now. We've been a part of this for that long, and we basically teach each other's dances, and then we create something together. We've been building repertoire on bringing all of these elements together as well.
Is
and
that
so
what you said? No, because is that Great Leap? Is that
yeah, Great Leap?
Yeah, okay. I was like,
yeah.
Talking about.
Yeah, she is the founder of Great Leap. She's our founder and artistic director. She's the one that kind of pulled on my partner Quetzal Flores and I, and we started building out this thing. And she's the director of all of this, and she's amazing. And she's pulled in West African drummers and so we share these cultures, again, circle dances as she calls them. And because we have a participatory way of doing things, so does Obon. Obon is participatory as well. And so is the West African dance and drumming as well. And so, and Le Ballet d'Embaya are from, South Central is the group that comes out and does all this and teaches the dances. And so anyhow, these things are coming together, but they're each separate in their own right. But we come together in fandango obon, right?
Okay, and then so and that's the point of being able to come together and being able to just understand that colonialism pulled us apart. You know, capitalism pulls us apart and tries to maintain this individuality and say, hey, no, we don't want to have this cross-cultural experience, because with that cross-cultural experience, we build and grow so much cosmically that you cannot stop that force. So, you know, I just love this, the collectiveness and the collaboration that you're talking about within the works that you're doing. It always comes back around to that. I appreciate that. And thank you for just stating it in the way that you are.
Oh, thank you. No, yes. It's a lot, you know, but yes, the apartheid of people and cultures is part of the plan, right? And these practices, I think, bring us together in really special ways. And then suddenly we're talking about very similar things, like, you know, Inglewood is going through displacement and gentrification as well. Boyle Heights is East LA is as well. So is Little Tokyo, right? And so all of these conversations, and that besides that, Nobuko really gets us thinking about how we need to think about environmental consciousness. Like,
Oh my
she's
gosh, yes.
an older Japanese American woman who is 84, 85, something like that, you know.
Yeah.
She knows that, you know, it's right around the corner, I guess, transitioning, right? But perhaps, you know, God forbid, and I can't even imagine when that happens. But I think that she's always thinking about leaving a better earth for everyone, and a lot of her life's work has been around getting people to think about the care of the earth. And so even she's making us think about those things as well, like, hey, let's talk about this, let's write things about water, let's write about no waste, let's write, you know, things like that. And she's
Look
just
at this.
amazing.
This is just funny, just the connections. Just, you know, just, and I knew, I was like, I know you know me before, because we were the 20th anniversary of Music Somebody's, you know, doing the on the Zoom that was done. But Nobuko, I didn't realize the connections in Nobuko. And I also did a residency with Great Leap with Dan Kwong about recycle, reduce, and reuse when you bring it up environmental justice. So it's just, I'm loving these connections, just having these conversations. So let me.
That's great. Amazing.
Yes,
so you're in New York now?
No, I'm actually in New England, the New England area. Oh
wow.
My God.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. It's a very different experience than
I was
Los
gonna
Angeles.
say, like,
And I'm from Washington, D.C. So it's I'm learning a different way to create or process, I should say, because of the experience of being in this very white space. And that's just what it is, you know, and being in a very rural space and thinking about rural life, not understanding until I came to this area, how rural individuals, people who live in rural world of our states, in the rural spaces, they're going through the similar things that folks living in the city, in the inner city, are going through. And having these connections and being able to talk about, and more so economically, what is going on and how people are being oppressed due to their economic status. But you know, I mean, it's a different process in different ideas that I'm gaining from, you know, being in this space and having conversations with folks who sort of live in a bubble, you know, here where I am, not understanding what's going on outside. And here I am coming in from DC and LA, and I went to school in New York as well, bringing all the city stuff in my experience and having these conversations and finding this connection in certain ways with people here. It's really amazing and fascinating, just thinking about collectiveness, you know?
Wow, that's awesome. Yes. Well, they're lucky to have you there.
We'll see. I'm sorry, Danny. I was just like, all of the connections. Oh my gosh, you know.
I'm totally resonating with what you say too, because I'm a city person. Like, I went from Mexico City to Lynchburg, Virginia, which like no one even
Is that where you're at, Jenny?
I know, it's so weird. It's so weird. So like, I'm totally resonating too, like from this huge city to like, and like here it's like, I can't even, I can't get Thai food. It's very sad. I have to drive like an hour and a half to get Thai food, or like just the things to make Thai food. So yeah, no, I mean, food is very important to me, but and now actually what's funny is my job here, which I never thought I would do. So my experience before Virginia has mostly been in prison abolition. So when I saw you working in the juvenile detention center, which is mostly what I did as a teacher before Virginia, was working in juvenile detention centers, that just like, that blew me away. And also I'm a percussionist, so seeing you play cajon, I was like, oh, Martha, like I need to know this woman. So I was so moved by that. I almost started crying, and I wasn't even like listening to what you were saying, because I saw how engaged the students were. And I will say, especially like, I understand like as a white person coming into, like, for example, a Texas prison where it's mostly Black and brown people, you know, there's like, I have to earn a lot of trust.
Yeah,
But
sure, yeah.
you know, I was curious about, like, for me, there was sometimes some hurdles to get students to open up creatively, not even necessarily asking them to be that vulnerable and like coming up with dialogue, for example, or coming up with beats, but just to like be a part of something creative, just to even like, you know, to accept that I might have some creativity within me. And so I'm just so curious about that. And I know like we don't have much time to talk about that, but that like just seeing how engaged the students were, I was like, wow, like I got very emotional. I was like, I really want to be like you.
You know, I have to say the first, we spent 5 days there. So the video you see is the culmination of 5 days where we're like, we're going to record this because the filmmaker who got the keyboard player got the grant from the state of Washington to bring us, myself and Quetzal, down from Los Angeles back to Seattle. Because I went to grad school in Seattle. That's how we met those guys to begin with. And then we went back home and they witnessed us do collective songwriting workshops. He was so, because sometimes we do it when we're on tour. And so this guy played with us, the keyboard player. He came back. He's like, I want to apply for a grant to bring you guys down so we can work in the juvenile detention center. I said, yes. He got the grant. We came down. We spent a week. We spent the night at my old advisor's house, but then we would go in every day for 5 days. At the end of the 5th day, you know, is the filming that you saw, but he filmed throughout, you know, and some of what you don't see again is the kind of trust exercises that we did with the help of Stacy, who is the woman. She was also there. She was talking like, bring your voice up. And like they were used to her. Exactly. They were used to her because she was like, she would do all the trust exercises at the beginning that we also participated in. And they were really fun. And, you know, just sort of like getting them loosening up for the conversation and / songwriting. But what I noticed is that helped a lot. But also, once you start with music and you start asking everybody, one of the things that we like to do is go around and say, like, what kind of music you listen to? Who do you like? And what's your favorite song? And then you get a sense of like, oh, okay, this is what they like. And then the musicians that are there, we try to get the ones that are the most versatile, that they can play any style, right? Like grooves or cool bass lines or whatever. And oftentimes the people that I work with, Quetzal, for example, is very versatile. He can play just about anything, and he can translate that for Alex, which is the keyboard player, and so we came up with that. And so once they hear the music, they're like, oh, okay. They try to act like it didn't affect them, but really they think it's cool. And then before you know it, they're like, sometimes some of them are like, hey, I have an idea. Can I just work on something by myself? I was like, yeah, go ahead. That's part of it, right? Like, so you saw Lady T there. I won't use her real name. emceeing her part. Think about all the theory in that work, you know, amazing. This is before the movement for Black Lives, okay? And the kinds of things that they talk about, their awareness of recidivism, right? What that means, I need help, looking for a way out, I'm trying to stay out, like all of that, that's them. And so it was just incredible. After they felt comfortable, they kept coming back every day. If they got in trouble, they wouldn't come back, so they were on their best behavior. This was right before Christmas. It was really sad, or right before Thanksgiving. I remember because some of them, the parents, like some of them were really sad because they kept calling and they were released, but nobody would come pick them up. And so some of them were really sad, and we would just hang out and talk to them. And I mean, it felt like, you know, like we had to keep going by all the different Sally ports. And like, I mean, it just felt heavy every time we come in, every time we'd leave. You know, we got to go home every night, but it was really hard to be there. But also like hopeful, because a lot of them, from what I understand, some of them are still in touch with Stacy. We're really, you know, like still write. They like to write. They like to, you know, we ended up recording little things for them so that they can listen to some of the stuff they did. And some of them are writing even in their journals or just to get things out and stuff. And so we're really happy about that.
I'm happy about that. I love that. I'm trying not to cry. And I miss doing that work so much. The work I'm doing now, kind of going back to food, I feed people now, which is awesome. And I'm
Beautiful.
trying to figure out how to intersect that with art, and I haven't quite like figured out what I'm going to do yet. I definitely am inspired to do a mural, which I've never done before, so that'll be new. But
Yeah.
I do really miss doing that work, and I really hope that you get to do more opportunities like that. And that, of course, makes me think of lots of other questions regarding funding, but I know we don't have time to go into that. I see Janet's face too, because like that's always like, I decided for myself, I'm gonna make art and not worry about making money from it anymore. And it changed my life. But Janet,
Right.
I think, is still like trying to,
Oh, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried at all. Like I know what it's but Danny is right in the thoughts coming around funding and just the ridiculousness that you have to go through sometimes to get grants or whatever to do your work. So for me, I've always had my money in the pot. And how I recognized to not focus on that was just from my mom, really thinking about her. She's like, I don't have worry in my vocabulary. I don't use that word. So I'm going to do what I do, and I'm going to get what I get, as they say. When you do the work, the universe will conspire to help you. So at this point in my life, even though, it's all of these other things that are happening now that I have a child, and I'm really thinking hard on, okay, I have to do this. I'm not stressing because I understand that I'm doing the work that I'm supposed to do. And just like received this position at the university, at George Mason University, and it just came and fell in my lap because I'm just doing what I do. I know it's going to be fine. So yeah, no, not worried anymore. I mean, I'm just, it's like, there's no point. There's no point.
I love that.
Growing up, I saw my mom juggle, so much money, move money around. She raised 4 of us by herself. My dad was out of the picture at some point, and just, she made shit happen. And watching her juggle her life that way, and but still be very hopeful. I'm a lot like my mom. I've inherited kind of like this hopefulness, always like looking on the bright side type thing. I have my moments, like, and when I sink, I go down. I mean, I'm just like, for a day or something, or I cry, and then I'm like back to it. But when I had my son, we toured for like 2-3 years after that. Still weren't really making any real money. Come back broke. Worrying about what was going to happen. He had a lot of health problems. He's much better now.
Good.
But that's when I realized, like, I got to go back to school. And I've always loved learning. And it was sort of to like see what I can do, what made sense that I wouldn't negate the last years of my life, right? Because I knew that what I had lived, everything from Chiapas to on the ground, and like what I had seen was important. There's something because I was like, this is what I've seen is extraordinary, and I've learned so much, and I can tell you what it is. And that a lot of academics affirm that as well, because people kept interviewing us about things that we do, or our lyrics, or things like that. Like, I love this song. Can you talk to me about it? I'm going to use it for this book chapter. And I remember after a while, I was like, wait a minute, artists could write about their own process, right? I was like, I could do that shit. And so then I started I owe honestly my venture into capitalism, which is really, I said, capitalism slash academia, was through a professor named Olga Najera Ramirez, because she did a book on folklorico, right? And she knew me from performance, and she'd be like, so what you do on that wooden box that you stomp on is not folklorico, ¿verdad? And I said, no, not really. It's like a mix, like, because I studied West African music and I'm a percussionist. And I said, and so then I kind of transferred some of the rhythms into my feed. And so she's like, can you write about that? And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, just tell me what that's like. Where you? And so then I started. So the first book chapter I ever published, I wasn't in grad school. I just like, and once I was done, and she helped me through it, she's not, say more about this, say more about that, directed me throughout. and then she said, you know, you can use this piece to apply to grad school, right? Because you need a writing sample. And I was like, oh, and I had no writing sample. It's like, really? She's like, yeah. So then I applied for a Fulbright and I applied to grad school and I got into 2 schools. And Washington offered me the best package. And I told my partner, I was like, Quetzal, I was like, hey, so, you know, we could do the Fulbright in Mexico for 12 months and then we could go to grad school. I could defer. They said I could defer. So what do you think? And he's like, hell yeah, let's do it. Sandino was still little. He wasn't going to school. So we dragged his little butt to Mexico for almost a year. And then we came back home for 2 months and then went to grad school. And so all of these things sort of kind of fell on our laps. But I will say this, that I think that the grant world is it's like they don't have imagination. And sometimes I think as part is building the language out, I think we need to help them sometimes try to understand. And then they feel like, oh, they're so innovative, right? They own your shit. And you know what I mean? Their deliverables are ridiculous sometimes. I'm like, you know, but there's a really beautiful, I had to review this piece. And if you ever go to the Alliance for California Traditional Arts, it's in California. They have a website. They have a section where they have publications. If you go there and you read Tending the Taproot, they developed out how kind of like a critique on how grantors think about giving grants. And they really, this piece, you have to read it because they talk about it in relation to the taproot of any living plant, right? And the way they talk about it's just beautiful language that all of us have to lift, because that's exactly and because they've been working with traditional artists, you know, their whole lives, and part of how they're looking at art grant language is they developed out a language for it, is what I'm saying. And the fact that it's human, that it's you know, it takes time to build out. It's not so quantifiable, the change over time in a community, right? It's not science, it's human beings trying to figure things out. And, you know, you're not going to see sometimes huge changes in one grant cycle. Sometimes the things that you want to talk about, they're like, what? Like, okay, we need to see more of this or more. They tell you what they want to see rather than really thinking and looking and coming to visit the community. And like, I mean, there's this whole problem around it. And then now, oh, they think they're so innovative because they're finally starting to connect art making with mental health. Like, oh my God, come on, you guys, right? Like, and so, you know, okay,
oh,
right?
Martha, preach, Martha.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, right? Okay, like, shut up, give me the money. Okay, fine. You know, yes, you discovered this, of course. Like, shit we've been knowing for years, right? Centuries. Our communities talk about it in this way, right? These practices. And so anyhow, I mean, I just feel like now finally some of them are starting to get the hang, and they want to be hip to it, right? And so they're starting to, you know, acknowledge these practices and really starting to use that language, right? Mental health and art and, you know, culinary, you know, food, and like also important to mental health and like all of these things. And it's like, of course, you know, but like academia, they've always compartmentalized, right? Art is art for art's sake, right? Sometimes. And now they're, anyhow, it's just, it's difficult. And again, it's capitalism, right? That puts them in a box and they're not thinking outside of the framework. And so it's difficult for them to see beyond what the dollar can give you and not the humanity in the practice.
Yeah, wow.
I'm so glad we got to answer that question. And I will make sure to find a link to that and put it in the links below to our YouTube channel. So yes, please visit our YouTube channel to find those links, people. We have to speak more to Martha in the future. I feel like we say that at the end of every podcast episode, but I just love the intersectionality. I love that there's just so much, like, and sin fronteras, like no borders, like I love it. Like the whole liminalness of everything, the whole process of everything, and the messiness, and just Gayate, give me the money. You know? So I love that. But yeah, I think, Janet, I think we have to go to our concluding question.
Yeah, and real quick, I think that Martha, if you don't agree with what I'm about to say, I feel like because we usually have a burnout question, and I think you answered that question in everything that you've been saying.
Burnout question?
Yeah, like the question would be, how do you deal with burnout, right? That's the basic question. But I
Yeah.
feel like you started us off with the tone of how you manage, just the mental health of living and doing what you're doing, right? And you said one step at a time, one thing at a time, I think. Is that is that sort of how you deal with this time of burnout?
Yeah. I think it's funny when, I recently was interviewed a bunch of time because of this MacArthur thing, right? And they're like, how do you, do all of these things? Well, to me, like all of the things that I do are in and around music. So it's always generative for me, right? In many ways, it's generative. It doesn't mean that I'm not tired at the end of the day because I've exerted energy here and there. And, I do take the moment where always I lay out and I watch TV, like just like veg out, or I just take a nap. Luckily I have the leisure to take a nap sometimes. I have to be careful not to travel too much. Travel too much sometimes, the traveling takes a lot of energy out of me. Have to always remind myself because not to give out too much and just keep some for myself and my family, and in order to balance it out, because I'm so passionate about the things that I do and I believe in them, and they're revolve around creativity and love. I have a lot of students, I have a lot, letters I have to write, things like that. Like I love to do that. I love to teach. I'm lucky that I went into academia and I actually love to teach. Like some people don't like teaching, some people don't like writing, and I love all of that. I can veg out on the writing for hours. I'll mess up my back because of it. So I have to get up every 15 minutes, walk around, do a couple squats, and then sit down again and do it, but I love it. I love going down the rabbit hole. I'm very lucky that way. But I also have to remind myself, like, okay, that's it. What time is it? If nothing is really pressing, I'm like, I'm done. No more today, and I try not to feel guilty about it because sometimes I'm like, Martha, you gotta, I try not to do that. That's why I work hard, and then sometimes I play hard. We go on vacation and we're gone for like a couple weeks, and I try not to do anything. Yeah, just as I get older, I'm trying to be more balanced. But I think at first I wasn't always, and I would forget, and I would get sick, or my body always reminds me when I'm not doing well and I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, and especially as I've gotten older. So I try to pay attention to my body, my mind, if I'm feeling, also protect my energy too, right? Where sometimes I like what I do, but there's people in projects that are negative or like really just like abusive even. And I fall into this moment of like, I was part of an abusive relationship. There's abusive relationships in every family, and I remember thinking like having to put up with it. And now I'm like, I really don't have to do that. I don't want to do that. It's not good for my health. It's not good for my spirit. And to be in an abusive relationship in a creative project, like not okay. Like this is why I do art. Like I don't want to have to put up with somebody who's rude or misogynist or, like para qué, it's like, no. I remind myself like I can now, protect myself, myself. Like I'm not a child anymore. I can exert this power over, like, I don't want to be here. I'm leaving, that kind of thing. So it's all those things, checking in with your body, checking in with your mind and your spirit, and not being ashamed or feeling guilty to make those changes.
Love it. So the unicorns, why do we have unicorn
Yeah,
backgrounds,
what's up with the
Janet?
unicorns? I love them.
Janet jumped the gun.
Look, you go for it, Danny. Go for it, Danny. You do.
We have a magical question we like to ask at the end. Our closeout question actually is not burnout because we don't want to end that way, but it's actually, Martha, in your utopia, there would be ...
there would be more communities of practice in art, in music, in food. The culture would spread. The culture of participatory practices would spread, and it would be something you do every weekend, that we come out and see each other and do every weekend.
Love it.
Love it. I hope that
feels
I could
good.
do
That
that
feels
with
good.
you at some point. That would be amazing.
You
I
gotta
think
come
we need
out.
a road trip to see your show and then to do a workshop with you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, please
Yeah.
come out. Whenever we're around, I'll make sure and try to. I'm bad at self-promotion. You know, Instagram, I try to keep up with that. It's easy, but like website or like Facebook's, forget it. I'm like the worst. Anyhow, but keep in touch with the Virginia and like things, like if ever, like we might make it out to your town. You never know. Like I said, we're gonna be in Cornell next
Okay.
month, and then we'll be in San Francisco, the Bay Area later. Yeah.
And this is a yeah. Thank you, Martha. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you guys.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much.
I really appreciate it. Like Danny said, like just you're an inspiration. Just what you do and how you do it, and learning from you, because you talk about how you learn from your teachers, like you are a teacher, and having the conversation with you today, I'm just like, man, I'm inspired, and I feel energized, and I feel hopeful.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you
Yeah.
both. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
You came in feeling hopeful. Now we both feel hopeful. This is great. I love it. Thanks for tuning in to Reflect, Recalibrate. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way we know that you love us. But for real, that we always know when to reflect, recalibrate. Also, don't forget to look in the notes to this episode for information on the apparel that we're wearing, the resources that we give in the episode, as well as a PayPal link in case you decide to send us some love. It's always super duper appreciated. The more love that we can get, then the more resources we're able to provide you all. Thanks again.